All righty, here we go. We're gonna let everybody in. This is always fun watching everybody pop in here. I love it. I see some familiar faces. I see some new faces as always. Welcome, welcome, welcome to everybody to the USDLA Free Friday webinar series. Just to clarify, it is open to anybody. I got a couple of emails this week as people were registering and they're like, can I bring my friend? Can I bring my colleague? Yes, yes, bring everybody. We want the more the merrier. And just like that, we have more people just trying to get in the door. So let's give them a second to get in the doorway. And there we go. So I'm just going to share a couple of brief messages because I know that we have a lot of amazing information here today that you actually came to hear. But unfortunately, I got to keep the lights on here. So I got to do a couple of quick announcements. Again, we're always happy to see everybody here at the webinars. So just quickly, you know who you came to see today. I'm going to turn things over to them in just a moment. But do want to remind you that this one is being recorded and shortly will be available to you for replay at usdla.tv. If you're not already over there and subscribed, you know, all the YouTube stuff, click the buttons and like stuff and watch it and all that good stuff. So most of our Friday webinars do end up over there. A few of them end up as member replays. So if you're not already a member of USDLA, we encourage you to consider that. I always remind people we do have a trial membership. So, hey, make use of it. Sign up as a trial. You can get in there, watch a whole bunch of stuff, get a whole bunch of content under your belt. Really, really nice way to do that. But again, we hope you do stay and become a long-term member. Also want to remind you about some upcoming events that we have. And an unusual switch to a Wednesday instead of a Friday. We recently put out a survey in our newsletter. Some of you may have taken that survey. If not, you still can come to the discussion. We're having a policy discussion on Wednesday, April 16th, and that's going to be 1 to 2. That should be on the slide. It's not, but it is also 1 to 2 Eastern time. So time zone adjust in your head as needed. I'm in Central right now. I always have all my time zones because who knows where I am on any given day. All right, more people coming in. Just 1 second, let them in. All right, so that is that discussion on the 16th will be headed up. It's not a presentation. Again, I keep saying discussion. I don't want people to come expecting that Alexandra and Rob have every answer to every question, but they certainly will do their best to direct you to some resources, answer questions that they can, and also just give all of us a chance to have some conversation around all of the different things that are going on as best we know today. Also coming up after that, we've had a couple of other webinars about accessibility. We've talked about working with Word and Google Docs and all sorts of other things and different tools that people are using. But we hadn't talked a lot about PDFs. So I thought that was kind of interesting. There are some unique challenges there. So you can come in at the end of the month and learn more about that, which again is tied in with other discussions we will be having today and other days. Finally, if you can, we would love to see you with us at the national conference in June. That's June 23rd to 26th, 25th. And then also if you cannot make it to the conference in St. Louis with us, we do have a couple of virtual days. That'll be the week prior to that. So the 17th and 18th, we have full days of virtual programming scheduled for you, as well as if you sign up for the virtual conference, you'll also get access to a number of the on-site events, our keynotes, the award ceremony, lots of things like that. As much as we can cram into the virtual conference for you, we're going to get all of that in there for you as well. If you have questions about the conference or anything, you can always ask me. I'll hang out at the end today, or you can email me, or just go to usdla.org and you can read probably more than you ever wanted to know about the conference. All right. As I said, a couple of things we have. This one is very focused on networking. It is not a cast of thousands. You literally have a lot of opportunity to sit with other people, find connections, find collaborators. I found a number of people that I've worked on projects with at the conference. So it is much more geared toward meeting people and collaborating than running around, but you do have a lot of great sessions as well. There's tracks around accessibility. There's tracks around gamification, including we're very fortunate to have Sententia Games coming in. They do a 3-level certification course, and it is recognized by ATD and SHRM and many of the other alphabet soup of names of associations and things. They'll be there doing their level 1, the first piece of their 3-part certification. And that is included in the price of your conference registration. So that makes something a little different than others. All the workshops, all of those types of things are included in the price. So, all right, enough of the infomercialing about that. Finally, I need to say a quick thank you to all of our amazing partners and sponsors, because without them, I wouldn't be able to do these. All of these type of free webinars that we host are made possible through the generous support of our members, our sponsors, our partners, and all of our just amazing friends out there that support the efforts at the association. So you see here, we have our platinum, gold, and silver sponsors. They come from the full range of hardware, software, services, anything and everything you would need to have distance education. So if you see names that you know and love, reach out to your reps. If you see new names you're not familiar with, and those of you who've been coming to the webinars recently, you're going to start to see new names because we have a number of new sponsors that have just joined us. Vizsla, they handle some video production using AI. You might not be as familiar with them yet. Emerald Publishing is just what it sounds like. They publish educational journals and all sorts of journals, but obviously that would be the ones most interest here. We have many of our long-term sponsors like Wolf Vision and Inscribe and all of the, I can't name everybody. There's too many of them. Because I also want to get to a quick mention of our bronze sponsors and exhibitors and friends. As we have Edge here with us today, you see them on the slide as well. So please, again, reach out. Some of the other newer ones on here you might not have heard us talk about yet, but you will in coming weeks and months. Atomic Jolt, Learning Stream, those are some of the newer ones. Innovative Educators, lots of things. And when we get to St. Louis, we also want to give a big shout out to our partners, our friends over at the St. Louis chapter of ATD, the Association for Talent and Development. So enough about all of that. I want to stop sharing for a moment, and we got everybody stuffed in the room now. I think that I can stuff in here for the moment. So I'm going to take this opportunity to thank and welcome and turn things over to Joshua and Laura to talk all about Title II. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yes, thank you very much. So make sure everybody can see this. Are we good? Okay. So hello, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about interpreting ADA Title II compliance, implications for institutions, and how you can prepare. As Valerie said, my name is Joshua Gaul. I'm the Associate Vice President and Chief Digital Learning Officer at Edge, which is a nonprofit 503c technology firm based in New Jersey that helps higher education K-12 government agencies in anything in and around technology and supports. My specific area is Edge Learn, which focuses on instructional design, ADA compliance, as we're going to talk about, project management, change management, that type of work. And Laura.
And I am Dr. Laura Romeo. I'm the Director of Learning, Innovation, Development, and Scholarship at Edge. And I also do ADA compliance, instructional design, and grant writing services. And we just actually kicked off our conference proceedings at our EdgeCon yesterday. So we are also getting that underway.
Okay, so today we're just going to talk about, just in brief, introductions to ADA Title II updates, key revisions and their implications as you're moving forward, preparing your institution for compliance, and then a call to action conclusion and what the next steps are. So to start with, why does this matter now? ADA Title II plays a critical role in ensuring accessibility for millions of Americans. It guarantees equitable access to public programs and services, and these updates come at a pivotal moment, right now in our industry and in the world. The existing guidelines haven't really kept pace with modern technology, and that leaves gaps in accessibility, especially in digital spaces. So this is our opportunity to address those gaps, align compliance with today's needs, and really make sure no one's left behind. Today's session is going to focus on understanding these proposed updates, why they're necessary, and how to prepare for them. Whether it's improving website accessibility or accommodating new mobility devices or achieving greater service equity, these changes really aim to create a more inclusive society. So a lot of times on these slides, you'll see an FAQ, which we'll address at the end. And the FAQ for this slide, why are updates to ADA Title II being proposed now? So it's been over 30 years since the last major updates. Technology and societal, expectations have really evolved dramatically since then. And these revisions are designed to make public services accessible in both today's physical and digital environments.
So ADA Title II, just briefly, under the ADA Title II, state and local governments have to ensure equal access to programs, services, and activities for people with disabilities. This includes physical spaces like courthouses and transit systems, as well as digital platforms such as government websites and mobile apps. The law really helps build trust in public services by promoting equity and inclusion. For higher education institutions, this honestly is really especially important. Public colleges and universities are covered under Title II, which means that their learning platforms, their registration systems, and campus transportation services have to meet these standards. So again, FAQ, let's tackle the first one. What is the scope of ADA Title II for educational institutions? It applies to all programs. It also applies to all services and activities that are offered by public institutions, which include those physical spaces that I mentioned and digital platforms like your learning management systems. FAQ 2. Does compliance only mean meeting technical standards? No. My claim to fame is talking about checking off boxes. So it's not just about checking off those technical boxes. Compliance is about providing equitable experiences and really thinking about the user and putting them at the forefront. So for instance, a digital form might meet accessibility guidelines, but still be confusing for someone with a cognitive disability. So both usability and accessibility are essential. Compliance doesn't stop at just meeting the standards and requirements. It involves regular audits, collaboration with stakeholders, and leveraging your resources to maintain accessibility over time. Later in the session, we're actually going to cover some practical steps to help you achieve this.
So the DOJ's proposed revisions aim to address gaps in decades-old standards. Technology, as everybody knows, now plays really a central role in delivering public services. Yet a lot of these digital platforms remain inaccessible. They're excluding people with disabilities. So, lawsuits related to accessibility are also on the rise. There were over 3,000 filed in 2023 alone. These updates about keeping Title II relevant they're about keeping Title II relevant as technology really evolves. They tackle issues like web accessibility, modern mobility devices, effective communication, with the goal of eliminating barriers and really improving equity. So the FAQs here, what kind of technological barriers do the updates address? Well, some examples include websites that aren't compatible with screen readers, apps with confusing navigation, videos without captions or without audio descriptions. What challenges do institutions face in adopting these updates? Well, I think I'm speaking for everybody, limited resources, lack of awareness about accessibility gaps. Those are really the most common obstacles we see. Starting with a plan and a phased implementation can help institutions prioritize critical updates. And we'll discuss your current standing, involving the right people, and how to use available tools and resources to prepare for these updates.
So what's at stake? Non-compliance has very real consequences. They include lawsuits, financial penalties, and reputational damage. More importantly, it creates barriers for people who depend on accessible services. So for instance, inaccessible websites or unreliable paratrans systems can prevent individuals from accessing essential services or even fully participating in their community. The steps we'll outline later, audits, stakeholders engagement, and resource utilization are really going to be key to avoiding these risks. So taking proactive steps is not only going to ensure compliance, but also build trust and foster equity. FAQ, what are real world consequences of non-compliance? So for an example, one city actually faced a multi-million-dollar lawsuit because its emergency communication system was inaccessible to people with hearing impairments, which cost that city high settle. They had to, it resulted in very costly settlements and operational changes. How does accessibility benefit users beyond compliance? So accessible features like captions or even simplified navigation can benefit everybody, including non-native speakers or even just users that are in noisy environments. So it's not just those with disabilities, but everyone that has access to the change.
So let's start diving into the actual revisions. What are the key revisions and what are what are their implications across the industry? So the DOJ is proposing to adopt WCAG 2.2 as the new standard of government for government websites and mobile apps. This update introduces specific guidelines that focus on cognitive disabilities, cognitive accessibility, consistent navigation, better touch controls. These changes are essential for creating digital spaces that are truly unusable for everyone. So some of these key improvements include accessible touch controls, which ensure buttons and other interactive elements are large enough to use easily on mobile devices. Cognitive accessibility features like consistent navigation and logical layouts, which help individuals with memory, focus, or attention challenges. Improved labeling and instructions, which make it easier for screen readers to interpret form fields and other interactive elements. So what does non-compliance actually look like? I mean, imagine a city website where form fields don't have labels. Imagine you have to use a screen reader to view that page. Screen readers can't identify what information is required if a form field isn't labeled correctly. Or a mobile app, for example, with crowded buttons that make it nearly impossible for someone with motor disabilities to use. Another example might be inconsistent navigation, which can really frustrate users with cognitive disabilities, let alone me, and prevent them from finding critical information. So while automated tools like a Blackboard Ally or Wave or anything like that can help identify some of these issues, they aren't enough on their own. That's where human testers come in. They bring real world perspective to identify usability issues such as confusing navigation, unclear instructions that aren't flagged by technology. FAQs. So how long do institutions have to comply with WCAG 2.2? Compliance timelines are staggered depending on the size and the complexity of the institution, with smaller agencies given additional time. It really, for higher education, it really hinges on not your FTE, but how large your reach is for students, what the number of students you could potentially affect. So your timelines are different based on if you're private, public, the size of your school, community college, so on and so forth.
So the proposed revisions also address accessibility and transportation services with updated rules to accommodate a more wider variety of mobility devices, such as motorized scooters and oversized wheelchairs. This includes ensuring that the boarding processes and the vehicle designs are inclusive. For paratransit services, the revisions simplify eligibility requirements, which reduces the administrative burden for users. They also require paratransit to match fixed route services in terms of reliability, timeliness, and affordability. So let's break down some common challenges and potential solutions for this. Many paratransit systems lag behind fixed route services, which result in missed appointments and honestly frustration for users. GPS tracking systems can really help this by providing real-time updates on vehicle locations, and on delays. A vehicle design might also not accommodate the newer or larger mobility devices. So, for this solution, transit agencies can address this by redesigning boarding systems to support a greater range of devices. To give you an example of a real world success, a public transit agency recently updated its paratransit system to include real-time tracking, which reduced wait times and ended up improving user satisfaction by 40%. They also redesigned their boarding procedures, which allowed users who had those larger wheelchairs to access buses without any issue. FAQ, how do these updates apply to institutions with their own transit systems? Um, I'm actually noticing that our FAQ is not quite aligned with what I'm about to address, but the one that I just said was just as equally important. So for colleges or universities with campus shuttles, the same rules apply. They have to ensure that accessibility is for all users, including those with non-traditional mobility devices. So coming back to the one that's on the slide, what if an agency cannot immediately meet equivalent service standards? The nice thing about these change requirements are that there is a somewhat flexible timeline. So there is time provided to address these. It doesn't necessarily have to be immediate, but a plan does need to be put in place for this process.
Okay. So really quick, I want to address, we had a question in there, and Laura, we did this last time we made this presentation. The standards for Title II require WCAG 2.1, not 2.2, because they're always going to stay a level behind the WCAG standards, but they'll move toward 2.2 in the future. But the standard, as it was revised, requires 2.1, not 2.2. So thank you for identifying that and calling that out. So let's talk about animals. So the DOJ also proposes updates to expand the definition of service animals to include psychiatric service animals, which addresses the needs of individuals with mental health disabilities. So these revisions clarify what tasks service animals can perform, such as detecting anxiety episodes or providing grounding for PTSD. And the updates really simplify the process for accommodating service animals, which reduces ambiguity around acceptable documentation and behavior standards. So this provides clearer backgrounds and guidance for institutions, and that helps minimize disputes and streamlines accommodations. So for example, someone with PTSD who relies on a psychiatric service dog will now have clearer rights when accessing public spaces. And at the same time, institutions will have explicit policies to verify and accommodate these animals appropriately. So to implement these changes smoothly, staff training is critical. Campus security, transit drivers, and other frontline workers should be familiar with the tasks that service animals can perform and understand how to interact respectfully with their users. So the FAQ, how does this affect public spaces like campuses? So what's really important is this focus is really about it focuses on minimal documentation and just enough to confirm the service animal's purpose and training without invasive questioning. So the goal is that any of these public spaces like campuses, that everybody that's involved in managing those spaces at any institution will understand how to handle them and how to handle them easily, instead of mountain of paperwork that these people that need these service animals will have to fill out. So it simplifies and streamlines that process the most.
So one of the most impactful updates is the requirement for audio descriptions in public videos. This is going to ensure that individuals with visual impairments can access critical information, especially in areas like emergency announcements, public meetings, and instructional materials. For instance, cities' weather alert videos should now include descriptions of evacuation maps, while live stream public meetings are going to need to have descriptive charts or speaker actions that make them more accessible. Similarly, colleges must ensure course materials include audio descriptions so that visually impaired students can fully engage with the content. here, Edge can help institutions implement these changes by collaborating with teams to really test how audio descriptions meet user needs and evaluate whether or not they provide sufficient detail for upcoming complex visuals. Sorry, my headphone is fell out. One moment. So FAQ, are there specific guidelines for creating audio descriptions? Yes, and they can be found, excuse me, online, and they are pretty easily accessible, which is nice, speaking on accessibility, and very descriptive as far as what needs to be changed and how we can meet that requirement. How can institutions effectively implement audio descriptions for a larger volume of content? So I think here the key would be to start by prioritizing high impact videos like emergency communications and course materials, and then phase them into updates for less critical content over time.
Okay, so how do you prepare? How do you prepare for compliance? So now that we've covered the key updates, let's talk about actionable steps that your institution can take to prepare. So this process involves three critical areas: conducting audits, engaging stakeholders, and leveraging resources. These steps are designed to help you identify accessibility gaps, prioritize improvements, and ensure continuous progress. So start with a comprehensive accessibility audit. This means evaluating your digital platforms, physical spaces, your policies. For digital content, automated tools like Wave or Axe are a great starting point, but manual testing with assistive technologies like screen readers are just as important. Check for common issues like missing alt text or bad alt text, inaccessible forms, or inconsistent navigation. For physical spaces, you need to ensure that ADA standards are met with features like ramps, elevators, clear signage. Policies should also be reviewed to ensure that they support accommodations and outline clear procedures for requesting them and meeting them. So once these gaps are identified, you need to develop a strategic remediation plan. Start with immediate priorities. Things like fixing inaccessible emergency communication systems, like Laura said, or enabling wheelchair access in high traffic areas. Then move on to the medium-term goals. It's a crawl, walk, run strategy, such as updating policies and providing training. And long-term goals should really focus on embedding accessibility into the design of new systems and spaces. Finally, remember that accessibility is not just a one-time project. It's an ongoing process. Regular assessments and feedback mechanisms, feedback loops and things like that are essential to identify and address new challenges. Staying informed about evolving standards will help you ensure compliance over time.
So how to prepare for stakeholder engagement. So the next step after excuse me, the next step is to engage the right people to implement solutions effectively. So accessibility compliance, again, isn't just about meeting those legal requirements. It's really about fostering a collaborative effort across your institution. So here you can start by engaging key stakeholders. Those people would be administrators like deans and vice presidents. They should really champion accessibility initiatives, while faculty and instructional designers are going to play that critical role in creating inclusive course content. And then students who have disabilities are also going to be essential participants here. They can offer valuable insights into the barriers and the challenges that they face and encounter, and possibly have solutions on how they can be addressed. So they need to be included in that conversation as well. Consider establishing an accessibility task force. This should be a cross-functional team that includes representatives from IT, facilities, student services, and faculties. Their role will be to oversee compliance efforts, set goals, and ensure accountability. By clearly defining objectives and responsibilities for each of these stakeholders, as well as timelines straight from the start, this is really going to help maintain focus on change, and also continue to drive momentum. Finally, prioritize training and professional development. Faculty, staff, and administrators all need ongoing education on accessibility best practices. So topics here might include creating accessible content, using inclusive communication techniques, and following technical guidelines like the WCAG standards. By providing workshops and resources, this will ensure that everyone involved really understands their role in supporting accessibility.
So preparing when we talk about resources, with stakeholders aligned, the final step is leveraging the right resources to ensure long-term success and sustainability. So let's talk about those resources, both the tools and the support systems that can help your institution navigate this path to compliance. So from technical guidance to funding opportunities, leveraging these resources can really make the process more efficient and effective. So leveraging institutional support. So your campus's accessibility or disability services office is a critical resource, as I'm sure you will know. Collaborate with these teams to address known barriers and align efforts with the broader institutional mission. Edge can help offer digital learning services that can help accessibility and online course design and faculty training, for example. Utilizing external tools and guidelines. Use established accessibility standards like the WCAG 2.1 to guide your efforts. Automated testing tools such as Wave and Ally are helpful for identifying digital barriers, but remember to complement these with manual testing to account for the human experience. Remember, tools like Ally are really just check engine lights. They'll tell you how well things look right now, and even them, they're only about 30% accurate overall across the board. Seek funding opportunities. Explore federal and state grants aimed at supporting accessibility initiatives. Many programs specifically fund improvements in higher education, such as retrofitting older facilities or updating digital platforms. We provide, like Laura said, Edge can provide grant writing support services that can help you in any step of that process. And then advocate for dedicated institutional budget allocations that can also provide the resources needed for larger projects. And by following these steps, auditing your systems, engaging stakeholders, and leveraging resources, your institution can build a roadmap to compliance that not only meets legal requirements, but also fosters an inclusive environment. Accessibility is an ongoing commitment, but with the right tools and team, it's entirely achievable.
So now that we've covered the proposed updates and how to prepare for them, let's work on bringing everything together. These updates are not just, again, about meeting legal requirements. It's not just about checking the checkboxes off. It's about fostering equity and inclusion. So by taking those proactive steps like auditing your systems, engaging stakeholders, and leveraging resources, your institution can really lead the way in creating accessible and inclusive environments, not just for those who have disabilities, but for everyone in the community. To prepare, institutions should work on doing three things. One, schedule a compliance audit to assess what's currently put in place, your current systems. Two, consult legal and accessibility experts to create a realistic action plan. And three, build stakeholder buy-in by involving users with disabilities in testing and planning. Accessibility is an ongoing process that, again, it just benefits everybody. So by adopting these updates proactively rather than reactively, institutions can really create systems that are going to serve all users effectively and equitably. FAQ, what is one key takeaway from these updates? I think that if you walk away with anything, know that accessibility is not just a requirement. It's really an opportunity to create more equitable and user-friendly systems for everyone. And what should institutions prioritize after this session? I think that if you could start by auditing your most critical systems and build in that action plan with steps that you can really move forward on, that's incorporating stakeholder input and expert guidance, that's going to be a really great place to start and continue to build that momentum toward making a real change in accessibility.
So next steps. I'm going to repeat again. We're going to hammer this home as much as we can to, start by scheduling a comprehensive accessibility audit to identify gaps and areas for improvement, engage those stakeholders across your institution to build an action plan that reflects the needs of your community, and consult with legal and accessibility experts, and consider us, consider Edge's expertise as guidance through this process too. These steps will position your institution as a leader in equity and inclusion while ensuring compliance with the latest standards. Develop that timeline for addressing audit findings, practical, critical, or prioritizing critical barriers, exploring funding opportunities like we mentioned, create a system for ongoing feedback, talk to the people on your campus that need accessibility services. They're the experts. So talk to them. We can't learn for them in a lot of cases. And finally, the sales pitch, leveraging Edge's expertise for continuous support from audits to implementation to training. Our access ready solution specifically provides all these services at a nonprofit rate. Finally, just leaving you with a quote, Deborah Rupp, a prominent advocate for disability inclusion and accessibility. She's the founder of Tech Access, a company that's dedicated to providing accessible technology solutions. And as a sought-after speaker and author, she shares expertise on topics like digital accessibility, inclusion branding, and leveraging hidden human capital. She reminds us, I love this quote, that accessibility is not a trend. It's a permanent commitment to creating an inclusive society. So let's lead by example and make the commitment together. Thank you, everybody. I want to get to the questions here in a second. I saw a bunch of good ones. I also saw a bunch offer some.
I tried to pull out the questions for you. So if you
we'll share this spreadsheet. One of the questions, this actually will answer one of the questions in there, which I believe asked, where can we find all the Title II regulations? They're in these links in the middle, the ada.gov links, and this we'll share this afterwards, so you'll be able to easily access that. So I'll stop sharing, and Laura, let's answer some questions. So
let's go for it.
Yeah. So going back toward the beginning of the session, just because I know we have people here with a variety of experiences, and some are just starting out with their journey learning about accessibility, and some have been involved with it a while. Had a couple of people want to clarify, understandably, which government agency manages this. So I know the answer, but I have experts here, so I'm going to let you answer. Where does this fall in the government, under the governmental structure? Who do we have to go to as far as when we have Title II stuff?
Laura, you want to?
Josh, would you like me to? Yep, I can take it. So the U.S. Department of Justice, so the DOJ, is the one that enforces ADA Title II. However, there are also some other departments that kind of oversee this as well, especially considering some of the intricacies of the new laws that are coming out. So the Department of Transportation, Department of Education, and the Department of Health and Human Services. Occasionally also the Equal Employment Opportunity, I think they're commission. They are going to be those departments are going to be primarily responsible for issues that arise within Title II.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's prompted by a complaint to the Office of Civil Rights. So OCR, it tends to get involved in that process as well. So if any lawsuit has been brought against an institution, a lot of times it comes as a directive from there. That's who usually you end up hearing about as the enforcing body. So
that's why it seemed like a simple question. It starts out sounding like a simple question, but I knew it was not, which is why I was like, I'm going to let the experts go into the details on this. I will just shamelessly also say, this is not the only chance that we're going to have a discussion around Title II, because as several people have mentioned, things are shifting and changing. If you can come to the conference, we have a pre-conference workshop to the timeline question. You provided some great resources for people. But we have a pre-conference workshop that focuses specifically on making sure you were on schedule with your timeline to meet Title II. Because we've been talking mostly about higher ed today, but this does affect the K-12 population as well. And so I just want to mention that if any of you have any connection there, you're not neglected. This all covers that as well. Some of you have that April 2026 deadline. Some of you, as Joshua said, the deadline is sort of a rolling. Results may vary depending on where you are. So, okay, other things that came through, as you said, you did address, but in case people missed it, that the guidelines and the timelines, you provided them with some great resources. And yes, this was recorded today. I got a couple of private messages as well, asking, if you would supply the slides and all of that sort of thing. So we'll work on that. John asked if individual instructors can be held responsible, sued, for not fully complying with this. So where does the stuff fall?
Short answer, yes. I mean, historically, I would say probably as much as like 10, 15 years ago, the institution would be the only one sued. But then around the mid 2000s, we started seeing more and more lawsuits against specific faculty members or departments in institutions. So especially if your institution has a very, very clear accessibility, policies, statements and things like that, more often than not, if your school, if one faculty member's behavior is systemic, it's not just them, it won't be singled out, but yes, it can happen. So it has happened. So, yeah.
All right. Great news. No, not to be all exciting on a Friday, but yeah, unfortunately. But we have some questions that tie in with that we're going to loop back to in a second. We had a question about if there were particular free apps available to check alt text and things like that. There was a great discussion in the chat. We had some of the people sharing some additional resources there. So I always encourage people, save the chat before you leave here, because it does have some good additional resources that beyond what you got from our speakers today. But I will let the two of you add anything else you'd like to about checking alt text and things like that, the technology side.
Yeah, the Wave tool plugin is really helpful across the board to check anything on websites or courses online. I love Arizona State's got a fantastic alt text generator that obviously double check because not always, but it's a great starting point. Especially we were talking about it at our conference a few days ago, especially in history class when you've got those maps that show like the passage of time. They're very good at identifying, building alt text for that. But like we mentioned, a lot of the tools that are embedded within LMSs like Ally or CD Labs offers one. I know PopeText, another company that integrate with LMSs. Those will detect alt text. They will not detect if it's good alt text. And if you've marked every image decorative, it doesn't detect it at all. So it only can go so far. But Laura, do you have any other suggestions for
Wave. I think I saw in the chat too, somebody had mentioned the non-visual desktop access, the NVDA. That one's a pretty good free screen reader. It's only for Windows though, I think right now. So I guess pros and cons. And there are a couple of built-in ones based on what platform you're running. So I think for Mac, there's like VoiceOver is a good one to check alt text as well. Just a tiny little stat to give you to keep in the back of your mind that these tools and technologies really only catch 30% of issues. So it's always really great to have that human eye on things as well. So you can't always just depend on these tools. They're a great place to start, but you really need to make sure that you're putting your own work into really making everything accessible. My little plug.
Excellent plugs. I said we want to get all the plugs in there.
Yeah.
All right. And of course, I know Laura's been looking at questions too, because I might miss one. You never know. Eric was asking about Title III, that he's been receiving some questions about that. I don't know if either of you have any thoughts about resources on that would refer to Title III.
Laura?
Yeah, so I think our expertise is Title II as it pertains to education and public universities. However, I do have a tiny bit of knowledge on Title III. I know that it's going to cover businesses like more public and commercial type areas. So I think that the physical barriers that people are encountering, that kind of addresses those issues, to remove the physical barriers, provide accessible services, and of course, offer those accommodations for people with disabilities. Sorry, if you guys hear my dogs, the cons of working from home.
They have
Um,
lots of thoughts about Title III. I can
they
tell.
really do. They hear me a lot. So, I think that Title III is more geared for not quite education. And not that it's not important, but it might, have a different place outside of this chat.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I was like, that's, you knew like 1,000 times more than I could have answered on that. I was like, yeah, no, not today. But I'm sure if others have additional thoughts, they will share them in the chat as well. Because
Yes, please.
this is a very generous group. I can tell the chat was very busy at times.
Deb's on fire in the chat answering all these.
I see that. I mean, she answered one of them. Laura touched on it about the tools. If somebody wanted to experience what it's like with a screen reader, and some great resources there with Read Speaker and NVDA that you mentioned, and some others. So yeah, we're all helping each other, because that's how we're going to get through this, because it is a lot, and but it's so important. Let's see. Before that, we had just a sort of an opinion here. Is the government committing resources to investigate and enforce these rules? If so, any thoughts on what might that look like? So should institutions be, what should they be doing? Providing documentation, walkthroughs, like some thoughts on.
One of the, I mean, the government understands that this is not a snap your fingers and it's done situation. So as long as you can demonstrate through documentation, through process mapping, through things like that, where you can show a good faith effort in improving these by the deadline, if the Office of Civil Rights or someone comes knocking on your door because they got a complaint from a student or something, you should be in the clear. But Laura, if you want to add, I know you were talking about that yesterday in your presentation, add a little bit more to that.
Yes, so I think courts are a little bit more understanding that this is not an overnight fix, and I think Josh was spot on. As long as you have that plan in place, and it is there are actionable efforts made on your part, and kind of a timeline that you have progressed toward making those appropriate changes. I think that that's where you're going to be okay. I am not a legal person by any means, so no quotes there. However, I do know that documentation is going to be your best friend for this. So make sure that you have everything written down and saved. And honestly, everybody that's part of the process knows the plan as well. I think that communication here is going to be really key.
That's good. Yeah, that sounds. It's last week we had the speaker was talking about substantive interaction, and we had some similar sort of spirited questions, and that was very much what came out of some of the recommendations from people last week was good faith effort, document things, because as long as you can show you've been trying to do what you're trying to do what you're told to do or think you're supposed to be doing, that's always that's never a bad idea. Never a bad idea.
Yeah, I think too, showing that you're being proactive with compliance is really important. So just to add a tiny bit, if you need an actionable item, so to do those self-assessments and some audits within, again, those critical areas, and have that remediation plan in place just to kind of provide evidence of compliance. So make sure you're doing the testing, you're gaining the results, and then you're actually doing something with that data. I think that's going to be that's key.
And one of the things, just to Laura, whenever she presents on this, always stresses, the ideas, because so many times you talk to faculty and stuff, you're like, well, now they look at accessibility as, oh, it's something else I have to do. So as much as the institution can bake the idea of accessibility and universal design for learning into the actual already established business process and procedures, the easier it'll be. I mean, something as simple as when your procurement office is evaluating technologies, make sure you ask for the VPAT. Make sure you ask for something that guarantees that the tools you're bringing on, the softwares, the systems you're bringing on, also care about accessibility. Then you've made it easier, and that's an easy thing to do. That just cuts down on the problems after the fact. So yeah, it's just making sure that you start to bake that process into everything you already do, so it just feels natural as opposed to one more thing I have to do.
I love that. I love that because you said it earlier. It's like accessibility is for everybody. It's we start out with it being sorry.
I don't have visibility issues, but I watch everything with subtitles now. I'm just a person because
Exactly.
But it's so helpful.
It is. I can't watch.
It's so helpful for so many reasons. I mean, a lot of people started doing it because want to watch a video while I'm on the plane or the train and don't want to be disturbing people. Some people don't adhere to that one, but that's a topic for another day. Let's see. Howie asked, this is an interesting question. At what point is a site considered not accessible? Are there some things that really would make it a tipping point?
Yes. So there's a list of things to meet that WCAG standard, the 2.1 standard. Inappropriately labeled or missing alt text, as we've mentioned. I think inaccessible forms. So, if you can't navigate through a form or a website using a keyboard, that's going to be non-compliant. Color contrast is really important here as well. So if a text is hard to read, that's going to be a non-compliance.
It's hard to read if color is the only way you're setting apart words that need to be stressed, or just color contrasts in general. Heading structures, if you're misusing or using heading structures out of order, an H2 before an H1 and so on and so forth. And there are a lot of things that you don't even see on a website that can violate, like empty header tags or, empty things that are just in the HTML. You can't tell by visually looking at a website, which is why Wave is a really good tool when you're looking at websites, because it goes behind the scenes and tells you where you're missing things. And
that's really important for those screen readers. So if a screen reader is having a difficult or challenging time or just can't, give the information correctly, then that's where a lot of the issues arise. So,
and one thing to keep in mind, especially when we're talking about course design and web design and things like that, is not everything that is best practice is a violation technically. One of the more frustrating things that is not really a violation, but is something that everybody really should adhere to, is consistency in font and text and things like that. Because if you're, it's the students with cognitive disabilities that struggle with non-structured things. If they're looking at a web page that goes from Times New Roman to Arial, then it goes to 12 point and then to 14 point, it's really overwhelming for a lot of those students. And while that's not necessarily a violation of WCAG or ADA standards, it's not good practice. You know, it's just poorly designed and very difficult for students with those issues. So.
Right. Most of the rest of the questions that were in there, people jumped in. They provided, somebody asked for the link to the Arizona State resource. Boom, there it was. They wanted to know more about WAVE that you've been mentioning. Boom, there's the link. Look at that. They did. And I'm going to gather all of these up. So we'll collect these and I'll make sure we have access to them. I really appreciate all the resources that people always provide in the chat so that we can all learn from each other. I'm taking one last look. I think most of these, yeah, there was one more comment about Title III. We may have to come back and talk about Title III another day. There appears to be some interest in that. So that's how I come up with the topics for these sessions. So, hey, you all have spoken. We'll look in that. There was a question from Janet about the deadlines. Can somebody provide the timelines? That I believe you addressed is a link in your presentation. Yep, that looks like that one. Some more amazing resources that people put in here. Lots of thank yous. Some even provided a great extension that you can use to check for color blindness. That's not a topic we talked about today. A personal thing, yeah, another, you mentioned the fonts. Yeah, there's some, I'm trying to think of the name of it, but people with dyslexia and things like that, certain fonts are much more readable for them and things like that. So it's always interesting to see some accommodations for things like the color blindness and those other issues. Yep, lots of thank yous. If you have any other questions, please feel free. I'm just triple checking because I don't want to miss somebody's question. If I did miss your question, if you put it in the chat and I have not already asked it, please repeat it in the chat so I don't miss it. I hate for people to leave and go, she didn't answer my question.
I don't think this was a question. I think it was more of a statement, but
Yeah.
it might provide actually, well, it's going to give my closing thoughts on things.
Awesome. Then let's go
as
with
we
that.
wrap up. Sure. So I can't remember who asked it because I just pulled it apart so that I wouldn't forget it. But it says equity and inclusion are not priorities for government at this time. This position may in fact impact support for ADA too. I think that I'm going to be PC. Regardless of our shifting priorities that we are noticing, right now, ADA Title II still remains a legal requirement that state and local governments have to follow. So that's there. It is still a thing that government agencies are continuing to be held accountable for compliance that do have enforceable actions and legal consequences. So leaving that. However, my biggest sticking point for accessibility is that equity and inclusion honestly directly impact real people. It's not just, written down legalese. So if we're considering the people that we work with, our neighbors, our family members, I think that when accessibility is not prioritized, these individuals who have those disabilities that are facing the challenges, they're going to start having to overcome unnecessary barriers. And, again, putting the shift, making sure the mindset is on ensuring that support's not just for compliance, but recognizing that, it's the right of every person to be able to engage fully. So there's my closing thought. I hope
Wonderful
that
closing thought.
continues to be the forefront of, the priority, but
Yeah, and he had a couple of comments coming in about that because it may not be a priority for some. That does not mean it's a priority for no one. And the attorneys will still be accepting the cases, I'm quite certain. And public support, people visibility, more awareness. You know, sometimes lack of action by certain groups brings more awareness to the topic. So that may happen as well. Joshua, do you have any other closing thoughts you'd like to toss in here? I want to give you some space too.
I can't top Laura. All I can do is I posted our emails earlier in the chat. I'll post them again down here. If anybody has any questions or wants to talk to us any more about accessibility or honestly wants some help, we are happy to chat with you. We can help in a lot of different ways. But most importantly, I guess I'll just say thank you all for attending. I feel like, you know, it was a great conversation, great questions. Thanks, Deb, for answering so many questions in the chat and providing so many resources. Everybody that provided so many resources in the chat, so thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you both. Thank you both for coming, and thank you for all of our attendees today. And for those who are going to be watching the replay, because I suspect that many of the people here today are going to be sharing and saying, hey, you should go check this out, because there was some good conversation and things going on. So I hope Joshua and Laura, I hope you'll come back. I mean, obviously this is something that will be going on and changing and other things and other topics. You don't have to just talk about Title II. You can come back and talk about other things. So I look forward to that happening too. So with that, I am going to turn off the recording. I'll stay on the line for a few minutes in case anybody has any lingering questions or just wants to network for a moment. So thank you all again for coming.
Thank you.